You think he's just busy, or distracted, or overwhelmed. But the truth is, when a man goes quiet with a woman he cares about, it's never random. It's regulation. It's avoidance. It's emotional processing that he doesn't have the language to explain. And if you don't understand what silence actually means, you will chase the wrong thing. You will fix what was never broken. You will abandon yourself, trying to get him back into the conversation. And by the time he returns, you won't even recognize how much of yourself you gave away just to feel chosen again. Because silence is not about communication, it's about power, fear, and the way his nervous system reacts to emotional closeness. And once you see it clearly, you stop asking why he's not talking, and you start understanding what he's protecting himself from and what it costs you to keep waiting for him to come back. When a man stops talking to you, the first instinct is to assume rejection. But most of the time, it's not rejection, it's distance as self-protection. Men are not wired to move toward emotional discomfort. They move away from it, especially if they feel exposed, misunderstood, or emotionally outpaced. And when a woman shows up with clarity, vulnerability, and emotional depth, it can feel stabilizing or terrifying, depending on his attachment capacity. If he lacks emotional regulation, your presence doesn't feel like safety. It feels like pressure. Pressure to be consistent, to be open, to be emotionally available when he barely knows how to be honest with himself. So instead of telling you that, he disappears because silence allows him to avoid the feeling without having to confront it. And this is the part many women miss. He's not withdrawing from you. He's withdrawing from the version of himself that feels inadequate in your presence. Silence is how he stabilizes his ego, not his heart. When he feels like he cannot show up as the man you believe he is, he doesn't step forward. He steps back because your emotional clarity highlights his emotional limitations. And rather than grow, he hides. This doesn't make him a bad man. It makes him an unregulated one. Men don't go silent when they stop caring. They go silent when caring begins to feel like something they can fail at. And failing emotionally is one of the deepest fears in masculine psychology because men are raised to perform, to fix, to lead. And when they feel they can't do any of those things with you, their nervous system shuts down, not out of disinterest, but out of overwhelm. Another truth most women are never told: a man's silence is not always about the present moment. Sometimes it's about old emotional wounds being activated. You didn't do anything wrong. You just touched something inside him he never healed. And because he cannot identify it, he cannot communicate it. So he avoids you, not because of who you are, but because of how deeply you make him feel. And depth requires capacity. A man without capacity doesn't step into depth. He escapes it. And the more you try to pull him back, the further he goes. Not because you're too much, but because you're meeting him at a level of intimacy he hasn't developed the strength to hold. Silence isn't the absence of feeling. It's the presence of emotional fear. And fear, when unprocessed, always looks like distance. That's why the strongest women don't chase a man's silence. They observe it. They recognize that silence is data. It tells you exactly how safe he feels being known by you. And a man who feels safe will communicate, even if it's imperfect, even if it's slow, even if it's messy. But a man who goes silent is showing you that closeness feels like danger in his nervous system, not comfort. This is not a communication issue. It's a regulation issue. And once you see that, you stop trying to get him to talk and you start asking if he has the emotional maturity to stay connected without disappearing. Because real intimacy does not require perfection, it requires presence. And silence is the opposite of presence. It is the language of avoidance and the blueprint of his inner emotional world. There is another reason. A man stops talking, and it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the moment. He realizes he cannot control the emotional direction of the connection anymore. Men feel safe when they can lead the pace, when they can approach, pull back, reapproach, without being asked to explain. That rhythm keeps them regulated. But when you become emotionally steady, when you stop chasing, when you stop proving, when you simply stay present, his old rhythm stops working. And the moment he feels he is losing emotional control, silence becomes the only way to regain it. Because silence halts momentum, it pauses intimacy, it gives him space to decide whether he wants to continue without having to confront the emotional expectations he now feels. Most men don't disappear because they want to leave. They disappear because they want to feel safe again. And safety for them often looks like space, not closeness. This is why a man can care deeply and still go quiet, because his heart and his nervous system don't always agree. His heart may want connection, but his nervous system is wired for self-protection. So he doesn't leave. He retreats, not permanently, but defensively. This is the difference between disinterest and incapacity. Disinterest means he doesn't feel anything. Incapacity means he feels too much and doesn't know how to hold it. And most women misread incapacity as rejection, which leads them to chase, clarify, over-explain, and emotionally collapse, trying to repair something that was never broken. It was just overwhelming. When a man stops talking, he is not saying, "I don't want you." He is saying, "I don't know how to be here with you without losing control of myself." And that is not something you can fix for him. That is something he has to face within himself. Another hidden layer. Sometimes silence is not fear. It is evaluation. He is measuring how much you revolve around him, how much your emotional state is dependent on his availability. Because men feel powerful when they can affect your mood, but they feel deeply respectful when they realize they can't. Silence reveals to him whether you are grounded in yourself or anchored in him. If your energy collapses, when he withdraws, he feels relief because now he knows he still has influence. But if you remain calm, steady, self-connected, he feels uncertainty, and uncertainty awakens his awareness. He begins to realize you are not attached to him. You are attached to yourself. And that shifts the emotional dynamic from control to respect. Respect is not built through emotional availability. It is built through emotional stability. And stability cannot be performed. It must be embodied. So when he goes quiet, what he's really encountering is not your absence, but your strength. Another thing silence exposes: his emotional depth. Men who can communicate don't disappear. They don't need to. They don't fear emotional exposure because they have learned that connection is not weakness, it is alignment. But men who go silent are still at war with their own vulnerability. And if he cannot face vulnerability, he cannot face you. This is not about love. It is about capacity. And capacity determines everything. Not charm, not attraction, not chemistry. Capacity. Because a man without capacity will only feel safe. in relationships that stay on the surface. And the moment you ask for more or represent more, he pulls back into silence. Because silence is where he doesn't have to grow. It's where he gets to stay, emotionally unchanged. And that is the real meaning of why he stopped talking. Not punishment, not confusion, not indifference, but emotional self-preservation. In a space, he does not yet have the strength to remain open. Silence is one of the clearest emotional languages a man has, especially when he doesn't know how to speak with words. Most women hear silence and translate it into loss, but men experience silence as relief, relief from pressure, from vulnerability, from the responsibility of being seen. Because being seen means being accountable, and many men have not yet developed the internal structure to hold emotional accountability. So they disappear into the only place they feel safe. Distance. Distance allows them to breathe, to regain control, to avoid the emotional mirror. You naturally become a woman with emotional depth is not just someone he talks to. She is someone who exposes what he has not resolved. And unresolved men do not lean into that. They retreat from it, not because you are wrong, but because you are real. And realness forces self-awareness. Self-awareness is the thing avoidant men fear most, because if he acknowledges how he actually feels, he has to decide whether he is capable of showing up or not. And for a man who doubts himself, that question feels like danger. So instead of answering it, he goes silent. Silence is not a tactic, it is a defense mechanism. It is what happens when his emotional system can't reconcile desire with fear, because men often want connection, but they are not always equipped to sustain it. Sustaining connection requires regulation, and regulation requires maturity. If he hasn't built that maturity, your presence begins to feel like something he could lose, and losing something meaningful hurts the masculine ego in a way most men are not prepared for. So rather than risk loss, he preemptively disconnects. That is the deeper layer. Men don't always leave because they don't care. They leave because they care and don't want to feel the shame of failing you, the shame of not being enough, of not being consistent, of not being emotionally strong. Men are raised with the idea that they must perform, that they must show strength. So when a woman enters his life with softness, with depth, with emotional steadiness, he feels two things: comfort and pressure. Comfort because he feels understood, pressure because he realizes he has to become someone stronger to stay. And if he is not ready to become stronger, he steps away to avoid feeling small. Silence is the mask men wear when they don't want to admit they feel emotionally inadequate. They won't say, "I'm afraid I can't hold this." They won't say, "You make me feel like I have to grow, and I'm not sure I can." They just go quiet, because quiet is safer than confession. Another layer most women don't see: a man's silence is not just about his fear, it's about the way he was taught to handle emotion. Most men were never taught to communicate their internal world. They were taught to manage it alone. So when they feel overwhelmed, they don't reach for you. They retreat into themselves. This is not cruelty. It's conditioning. Men think space will protect the connection. Women think space means the connection is ending. So you interpret his silence as disinterest, while he experiences his silence as self-regulation. And this is where emotional mismatching begins, because you start to feel abandoned, and he starts to feel less emotionally safe. the more you reach for him, not because you are too much, but because he feels exposed. And exposure for men feels like vulnerability. Vulnerability feels like risk, and risk feels like something his nervous system cannot sustain. So he disconnects. Silence for men is the emotional equivalent of going underwater. It's not meant to hurt you. It's meant to help him breathe. But if he stays there too long, he loses the connection, not because you leave, but because the emotional bridge collapses from neglect. This is why emotionally mature men don't disappear. They communicate, not perfectly, but consciously. They know that connection is maintained through emotional presence, not emotional withdrawal. But immature men associate vulnerability with weakness, and the moment the connection asks them to be vulnerable, they go quiet, because quiet protects their identity, and identity is what men are most afraid of losing. The identity of being strong, of being in control, of being emotionally unaffected. Your presence challenges that identity because you feel deeply, you communicate clearly, you remain open, and openness feels like a standard that he now has to rise to. Silence is how he avoids the feeling of falling short. Another truth: silence is often the moment a man realizes you matter more than he expected. If you didn't matter, he would simply walk away, not pause, not disappear, not create distance. He would just end it. But silence shows he is still emotionally engaged, just internally conflicted. He's not absent, he's processing. And men who process without communicating always look like they don't care, when the truth is, they care, but don't know how to hold the weight of what they feel. So they step back to stabilize themselves, not to reject you. But that distinction only matters if he returns, because if he doesn't, his silence stops being regulation and starts becoming avoidance. And avoidance is not something love can fix. Only maturity can. That is why the real question is not, why is he silent? But, does he have the capacity to stay present with a woman like you without disappearing every time emotional closeness appears? Because a man who goes silent is showing you exactly how he handles emotional pressure. And that is the most important information you will ever get before deciding how deeply you want to stay invested. When a man goes silent, you are not witnessing distance. You are witnessing the edge of his capacity, the point where his emotional structure can no longer hold what the connection is asking from him. Most men don't have language for that, so it shows up as space. But space is not neutral. It is loaded with fear, confusion, and the need to feel in control again. Because emotional closeness creates vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens the masculine ego. When he has not learned that love does not require performance, it requires presence. Presence is something unregulated men cannot sustain. So they disappear and tell themselves they just need time. But what they actually need is internal strength. Without it, they will always experience connection as something they can lose, rather than something they can build. This is why silence repeats, not just with you, with everyone, until a man learns how to sit with discomfort without shutting down. His silence is not situational, it is structural. It is who he becomes when he feels emotionally exposed. You are not seeing his rejection, you are seeing his emotional limits. And limits are honest, even when they are painful. That is the part most women never accept. They assume that if they love him correctly, he will come back open. But love does not create capacity, it reveals it. A man either has the nervous system stability to remain connected, or he does not. And silence is the clearest indicator of that truth. Because when a man is truly safe with you, he doesn't disappear. He leans in, even if he needs space. He communicates it, because he understands that connection is not sustained through perfection, but through emotional honesty. So if he's not talking, it means he's not able to stay emotionally present at the depth the connection has reached, not because you asked too much, but because he has not yet built the emotional grounding to hold what is real. And realness is where relationships live, not in chemistry, not in attention, not in the beginning, but in the sustained ability to stay present when things feel uncertain. Silence is what happens when he cannot do that. Some men go silent because they are overwhelmed. Others go silent because they are evaluating, but both share the same root. They are unsure how to proceed, and instead of speaking into uncertainty, they retreat from it. That retreat is not about you. It is about the fear of being seen as inadequate, because if he speaks, he risks revealing that he is not ready. And readiness is the thing men protect most. They want to feel like they are leading. They want to feel capable. So when they feel emotionally outpaced, they don't slow down. They withdraw. Silence restores his internal control, but at the cost of emotional intimacy. That's the trade-off. And that trade-off tells you everything you need to know. Because a man who chooses distance over honesty is not emotionally ready for closeness, and emotional readiness determines relationship success more than love, more than effort, more than timing. Readiness. So the meaning behind silence is not that he doesn't care. It is that he cannot stay at the level of connection you are offering. And if he ever does return, you will notice the difference immediately. He will either come back with awareness, or he will come back with the same emotional pattern. And patterns don't change until the man does. That is why the strongest women don't wait in silence. They interpret it. They let it show them how safe he is being known. Because the goal is not to get him back. The goal is to stay aligned with yourself. And self-alignment is what keeps your nervous system steady, even when he disappears. That steadiness is what allows you to recognize the truth. Silence is not abandonment. It is clarity. It tells you whether this man is capable of showing up in love without disappearing into fear. And once you understand that, you stop asking why he's not talking, and you start deciding whether you want to keep investing in someone whose emotional response to closeness is distance. Because real connection is not measured by how intensely someone begins. It is measured by how consistently they remain. If this helped you understand silence in a way you've never seen it before, pause for a moment and comment the word aware below. Not for him, for yourself. Because awareness is what protects you from chasing what was never meant to stay. And that shift is where your power returns.